Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Regal Live Series. Apologies for joining a minute late as we were trying to figure out some of the last minute technical glitch that we had. Regal Live Series is a weekly live series that aims to enable coaches to build a prosperous coaching business by becoming the best coaches that they can be. In this edition of the Regal Live Series, I'm glad to have with us once again John Serrao. Though John doesn't need an introduction, he is a popular figure in the community, but allow me to introduce you, John. He is the managing partner at Serrao and Associates. He brings more than 30 plus years of experience in finance, marketing, sales, legal, administration, training, facilitation, and coaching. He is a fellow member of various professional institutions like the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. He is an ICF MCC and a certified mentor coach from inviteChange USA. He has a rich corporate and consulting experience, having closely worked with many Fortune 500 companies. In the previous edition, we discussed about the importance of maintaining coaching presence in cultivating trust and safety. So today we aim to build on that by deep diving into the ICF Core Competency 4, Cultivating Trust and Safety. Now I invite John to take us through ICF CC-4 for his opening remarks. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Anirudh. And again, apologies for being late. Just wanted to let you know that in this competency, trust and safety, it's a competency that is important because it allows for a fuller revelation by our clients of themselves. And that is why it is important for us to be intentional about developing this trust and safety. Now, the question is, how do we do this, right? And if I look at the competency, it talks about cultivates trust and safety. And if you look at the language of just the competency, it's in the present continuous tense. So, which means that trust and safety is something that you start right from the beginning and it continues until the end, not only in the coaching session, but across coaching sessions. So that is important to note. And what the definition talks about is really partnering with our client to create what is called as a safe, supporting environment that allows the client to share freely. And it is also based upon mutual respect and trust. And if you look at the CC-3, for example, which is about contracting, and if you look at the key words in that competency, it's really about partnership all the way. So we are really acting as partners in this relationship. Although our talk time is actually more like 20-80, 20 in favor of the coach and 80, but it's a partnership all the same. It is therefore a meeting of two equals, and we need to be intentional about the partnership itself, because the way you come into the session will set the tone for whether you are a partner or whether you are in this guru position. And we are not gurus here; we are partners. And therefore, it's important for us to be intentional about that, and to create that space so that our clients feel free to open up. And when they feel, and some of the things that go into ensuring trust and safety is how do you respond to things that you hear that may perhaps not even be aligned with your value system, for example, right? How do you make them feel comfortable? What is it that you say? Now, I'm going to share a little bit about the neuroscience behind this. What the neuroscience says, and this was validated by the works of Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers came up with client-centered therapy, and his therapeutic model was based on three important parameters. The first of which is congruence, which is nothing but being authentic. The second is unconditional positive regard, which is to regard every person unconditionally in a positive fashion. It's not about liking them or loving them, but regardless of what they say, do, or behave, can we hold them in that positive regard in an unconditional manner? And the third thing that he mentioned was being empathetic to them. And empathetic behavior is nothing but being able to step into our client's shoes, to feel what they feel, hear what they hear, see what they see, and be able to communicate a little bit of that understanding back to them. And his model was based on this framework. It's a very simple framework. And yet, when I was talking about this framework or this model with um, somebody from our church, a brilliant girl, did a PhD from UMass, and I asked her. I said, "Look, her name is Preeti." I said, "Preeti, do you practice the Carl Rogers client-centered model in your therapy sessions?" And she looked at me, and she's a wonderful girl, by the way, very empathetic, very sweet, sweet to a fault. And she looks at me and says, "But uncle, that is so hard to do." Right? Now, if you think about it, here is something that Carl Rogers figured it out, that has been borne by neuroscience, for example. Now, what does the research in neuroscience says? Neuroscience says that 30% of the neurons that we have in our body are what is called as mirror neurons. And those mirror neurons are able to latch into the other person's mirror neurons. And therefore, if I have a judgmental posture to my client will sense it. The moment my client senses it, and they will sense it at the mirror neuron level, right? They will not be capable of even putting into words. They may not even understand why they feel the way they feel the way they do, but they will sense judgment on our parts, and then they will stop sharing. Which means we need to approach our sessions with empathy, showing support and concern for our client. Like, for example, if our client shares something difficult, can we empathize with them? Or do we rush in to ask a question? Right? Can we, for example, demonstrate openness and transparency ourselves? Can we be authentic ourselves? Because that promotes authenticity in them. When they see us being authentic, they get permission to be authentic. When we don't judge them, they get permission to not judge themselves. And that's the beautiful thing that happens in a coaching conversation. At a very fundamental, deep biological level. And the beauty about research that has happened is that when research has been done by different systems, like in this case, psychotherapy, for example, right? And the other one is neuroscience. And when you look at their findings, you find the convergence of their findings, and then you know there is validity in something like this, right? So this is really about what we need to do or what we need to be in a session where we really come there, are able to understand the client, their identity, their environment, for example, their experiences, the values, and their beliefs. So really, the competency 4.1, for example, understanding their identity, their perceptions, their style, their language. And it says, adapt our coaching style to their style. For example, it is quite possible that your client might be such a visual person and artistic, and they might feel very comfortable drawing something to express themselves. I suck at drawing. I admire people who can draw. But if they are able to draw something to express the deeper selves, can we invite them to do the same? Right? That's really about adapting our coaching or our coaching style to them, to their styles. Their style of learning, their style of creating, their style of understanding, for example. Right? Showing support, empathy, concern. We have already shared that. Acknowledging and supporting the client's expression with respect to their feelings, their perceptions, their concerns, their beliefs, and suggestions. And finally, I just want to share something very interesting. The sixth competency says demonstrates openness and transparency as a way to display vulnerability and build trust with the client. Oftentimes, we might be in a position where we might not even know what question to ask. We might be confused. Can we, at those moments, share with the client that, hey, I am at my wit's end. I just don't know what question to ask. Can we be that vulnerable? Because in us being vulnerable, we give permission to our clients to be vulnerable and they start sharing with us. So let me pause here. I've done quite a bit of talking. Anirudh, you have any questions to ask them?
No, there are so many tangents, but each statement you made, John, is fantastic for me. Something the way it ties in with presence, right? Something as basic as trust and safety in a conversation, being present in a conversation. Today, as coaches, we have the privilege of demonstrating human quality and get paid for it.
Yeah.
And the research that you spoke about, again, brilliant. As you said, each independent technique, if it comes down to a similar conclusion, that shows the validity of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from a coaching standpoint, I never thought that, if I do not have a question to ask, just be authentic with the client. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So at this point, we have a question from one of our viewers, Meena. So I'll just display that.
Yeah.
Meena asks, how are trust and safety different in a coaching conversation? Why do we need both?
That's an interesting question. So, Meena, I think the earlier competency stated trust and intimacy, but intimacy has different connotations in different cultures. So, while you might think of intimacy as closeness, there's a sexual connotation to intimacy, which is why it has been replaced by trust and safety. And safety is important because it's in many ways they go hand in hand, right? When you are able to trust each other, you make each other feel safe. You're not judging, right? And our endeavor as coaches is to help our clients feel safe in the space that they come to with us, where they don't feel judged, where they feel listened to, where they feel heard, where they feel seen as human beings, right? Not a client who is being coached and therefore he or she is paying me a certain sum of money, but you're looking at the entirety of their being in that sense. You forget everything else. And when in fact there's another research which is basically Project Aristotle project was from the works of Google, and they looked at it from a team perspective. What makes high performing team? And they came up with this thing called psychological safety, which was nothing but where people feel safe to express themselves without feeling judged, shamed, or shut down in any way, shape, or form. So, Meena, I don't know if I've answered all your questions, but feel free to ask again if you feel otherwise.
So, John, if I may add into what you mentioned,
yes,
I feel that being present in the conversation, leads to trust, and trusting yourself and trusting the client enough to be vulnerable and authentic creates safety. And when that safety is created is where the shift happens. So, John, you briefly touched upon Carl Rogers.
Yes.
Right. So, as a psychotherapist, as a psychiatrist, it was radical for him to introduce UPR, unconditional positive regard, for example. And what makes you connect that with CC-4, if I may ask? Totally different fields of work.
Yeah.
But where do you build the connection?
Yeah. So the connection really has to do with judgment, right? We are all judgmental creatures. So we all judge all the time. When the way somebody looks or dresses or talks or behaves, we are always judging them. And we have to remember that that we are capable of doing the very same, that we are also being judged by somebody else, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But in a coaching conversation, when people come share their problems, you may have probably had experience in that regard, for example. And if you start feeling that, hey, this is a minor trivial problem, why is this such a big deal for this person? that the sliver of judgment starts floating in your mind, and the other person will sense it. And therefore, it's important for us to have that positive regard for that person, and in many ways unconditional. It's not even conditional. It's not even conditional on how they look, what they say, how they behave, but it's completely unconditional. And we have to be very intentional about that. The beauty about all of our coaching competencies that they can, almost all of them can be practiced outside of a coaching conversation. So we have ample possibilities, and in the process, this is very important for us to note, Anirudh, that we can actually create a shift in our beings. We can actually be better versions of ourselves. Today I think I'm far better as a human being than I was 5 years ago. Right? I still stumble from time to time. From time to time, I still screw up. But the awareness is there that, hey, I've not done it right. Right? I need to do something about it. So these competencies can't help but make you a better person, a better human being. Yeah,
we have a follow-up.
Yeah, so Meena, yeah, you could look at safety being psychological safety. It is, in that context, yes, it's the ability to be able to express yourself, feel not judged, feel accepted, feel heard. Yes.
So, John, as you mentioned, I think true mastery lies there to look at the competencies not just as coaching competencies,
Yes.
but I would say human competencies. This is human nature.
Absolutely. In fact, I did a session once in Lithuania, in a place called Vilnius, for the Lithuanian Coaching Academy, and I shared about how these coaching competencies can't help but actually make you a better person, provided you are willing to submerge your ego and work on yourself.
That's the Goliath to tame.
Yes. So I see also
we have a question from Satyajit.
Yeah.
How does the CC 3.4 used as a step if client starts going deep? How do you use CC 3.4? I think is the question.
So is it so Satyajit, just to clarify this, is it competency 3.4 or is it marker 3.4? Because marker 3.4 has to do with what do you need to work on in the conversation.
Yes, I think that's what he's referring to.
Is it
what needs to be addressed or resolved?
Okay. How the CC 3.4 to be used as step if client started going deep on his own? So that's a good question, Satyajit, although it's not within the scope of our trust and safety, but I will take the question. So if a client starts going deep on their own, you can tease out what are the issues that the client is surfacing and check in with the client if this is the problem that we need to work on. Yeah, so it's completely okay for the client to go deep on their own, but we also need to mark that marker, or at least identify that marker, so that if that marker is big and important, then we can even our questions can go around that specific 3.4. Do let me know if that answers your question. Otherwise, I'm happy to take a clarifying question.
So, John, as we're in the last minute, I have a follow-up question from Satyajit.
Yes.
I think it beautifully ties into trust and safety. We see a lot of leaders demand for a coach from their own industry background because I think there's an innate trust that is there.
Yeah.
His question is, why do leaders demand that?
Yeah. So I will answer it in two ways. One is that maybe leaders demand because they feel that if somebody is from the same industry or functional background, then they might be better able to serve their clients. But I'll answer it this way, a second differently, that if that leader actually knows what coaching is all about and is extremely familiar with coaching, then it's a moot point, right? It doesn't matter because the competencies are such that you can actually coach anybody in any industry or function. It is domain and problem agnostic.
And
but you need very aware coaches who know about coaching to be able to make those requests. Otherwise, they will always ask for same industry or functional background.
As you rightly said, John, I think they still look at coaches as mentors.
Yes,
So a
yes.
line that we use very popularly is,
That's probably the third one, Anirudh. You're right. That they're
so,
looking more for mentors, not coaches. Yeah.
so a line we use a lot, Satyajit, is that you are the subject matter expert as a client in your area of work. We are a subject matter expert in coaching. So we do what we're good at. You can be what you are good at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, John, any closing remarks as we are towards the end of our session? Thank you for the
No.
session. Any
Yeah, no. The only closing remark that I have is that that I would suggest that we do is really work on being non-judgmental, this has to be very intentional. You have to practice in every situation. I have found it useful to think of it in this way: that when I'm judging another person, I realize that I am quite capable of doing exactly what I'm judging the other person of, and that keeps me grounded. That helps me. And I realize that we are all capable of making mistakes. We are all human beings. And therefore, can we then, therefore, give them that unconditional positive regard and be non-judgmental? I think if we did that, we would take trust and safety to a very, really elevate it to a large extent. Yeah. Thank
John,
you.
it's brilliant. I think that hits the nail, that we are capable of what we're judging others for.
Yeah.
And somewhere I see that we judge some people for what we feel insecure about ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for this wonderful session. I really like the way you bring in the competition into the personal life also, John,
Yeah.
because I think
Thank you.
that's what it's about, to become better humans.
Yes. Yes. I think the goal for us all coaches should be, and this goes to CC2, which is embodying a coaching mindset, that we all need to be coaches, not only in coaching but also outside of coaching. Yeah.
So thank you, viewers, for tuning in today. We are really happy to have you here. Thank you, John, for taking the time out on
Thank you.
yet again. We
Thank you.
look forward to seeing you next Thursday, dear viewers and listeners. Same time, 9 p.m. on Thursdays. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank you.
evening.
Thank you. Thank you, PK. Bye. Thanks, Anirudh. Bye bye.